So we gather once again, in reality and in virtual realities. Multiple realities. All right, well, welcome you all. Namaste to our Tuesday Satsang. So I'm going to start with an invitation to India. We're going to India. I have been resisting it, but I recognize that when you're on a threshold of a new transition, there's usually resistance. So I have surrendered to India. And I'm not sure I'll be going again, but we do have a facility in India just waiting for us to use. And so I'm going to take advantage of it. And I invite you to join me. Join me for India. In part, it's in the theme of today's talk, which will be about grace. Whoops, we're getting a little echo. Okay, so when we speak of grace, we speak of the mystery. We speak of faith. We speak of something that comes from the soul. There is something about India. The culture holds the grace. The land holds the grace. The cows hold the grace. The birds hold the grace. The noise is the dance of the grace. It is a noisy place, except right where we live. So what you want, the invitation of India, is to saturate yourself in grace, in the atmosphere that's uniquely India's. There is something of the gift that India is. It is a worthy pilgrimage place. It is New Dharma's pilgrimage place. It was where all this came to me. It took it beyond what it would have been if I had stayed here in the West. It brought forces that are in the collective consciousness that are supporting an evolving soul that are not here in this still relatively new land where nature is still very dominant. In India, it's a rich history of human beings striving to be in relationship with God. It saturates the entire atmosphere of the country. Even though there are places of westernization, at the core of it, people live lives aligned with Dharma much more than we do. They sacrifice for their families. Their children sacrifice for their parents. They have a sense of being held in a tradition that has an organizing principle based on God, on truth, on the possibility of each individual discovering that divinity within them, not some sort of hierarchy, but rather a structure. So you enter into, especially around Tiruvannamalai, where one of the major Shiva temples exists, where Ramana Maharishi's meditation center exists, where all of this sadhus are on the side of the road waiting to be fed at their meal times. There is this tangibility, physical tangibility of the grace that we speak of, the mystery, the quality of faith. So India is a place to go to expose your system to energies that are aligned with the purpose that I'm bringing you towards, that may bring in frequencies that I can't bring in myself. I recognize we're now starting using the 1,000 names here in the temple, such a Mandir, but it'll be years before it has anything of the vibration that India has automatically. So the principle of India is that it assists the soul in making a transition because there are divine beings and forces that join with your aspiration, with your longing, that can carry you beyond yourself and take you to this ancient fundamental truth that India is able to hold, has been able to hold. So when you join me in India, what you have what happens in the force of Sat that comes in, and you have a womb, an incubation, a rich field, a spiritual nurturance at the same time, so that the transformation can immediately be in this atmosphere, a favorable atmosphere, so that it can come in and integrate and organize your system in ways it can't do in the West, period. So if you haven't been to India before, or been to India with me, then this may be your last opportunity. But if not, and even if I go again, at least one time, give yourself this grace. Okay.
You want to talk about what the schedule will be like?
Yeah, so, all right. Do you want to talk about how the schedule will be like? Jaya, you ready to talk about the schedule? Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, Jaya's good.
Yeah. We had to find somebody to talk about the facts, That's okay. There's one. Make it until you make it.
Okay.
All right, there you
There we
are.
are. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. So the schedule is now on the website, so you can look there for more details if you're feeling called. But I'd say it's a constant schedule. We've got events every day. There's meditation every morning. But there is some spaciousness so that we're doing the programs, but then we also have space to integrate and just be in the energy. There's a meditation every morning. There's a SOT weekend partway through, 2 intensives, and then world peace meditations, small groups. I think that's about all.
And there's a lot of free time.
Yeah, and
There's
free
a
time
lot
in
of free
between
time.
to
Yeah.
just, be in the energy and just be on retreat.
Hug a cow.
And hug a cow. And there's a 2-week optional period afterwards, so there's a draft schedule for that. So if you're really feeling to be on personal retreat, there's a 2-week period after that will just be, space will be held by facilitators, and we'll have a daily meditation and then meet about twice a week as a group. So really open, but a chance to just be with yourself in Tiru.
Good, thank you.
Applications are due December 15th if you're feeling called, and there's lots of information on the website. There's a whole FAQ if you're really wanting to get your head around what will take place there, and you can always send an email, newdharma@gmail.com. There you go.
Very good, thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's good in a pinch. Now, if you're new and you're not sure you qualify for India, then write to newdharma@gmail.com. If I'm not seeing you right now, and there is free intro calls where I listen to after you do them with one of our intro call facilitators. And then when I listen, I can say yes or no to you're ready for it. So other than that, it's a worthy opportunity for all of you. All right. Namaste. I feel India's right now. It's like I evoke it. It's like,
You did.
come.
You evoked it.
Yeah, it comes
Plus, there are
in.
people on the screen who are already signed up to go. So
Yeah, that's right.
looking forward to seeing them.
All right, so I wanted to speak about some of the aspects of the spiritual path that become actually more tangibly accessible to us when we really start experiencing in our system devotion. When we start feeling the vibrations of the mantras, when we start sensing tangibly as a felt sense in our bodies, this principle of grace has come to you. It's trying to find its way into your biochemistry, into your heart, into your mind, into your body. It's trying to find a place where it can catalytically trigger what will be your next step on the journey towards your universal self. So devotion and grace are the key secrets. What is devotion in your own experience? It's different in an awareness person than it is an experiential person. Devotion is more readily accessible. in a person who lives in their emotional body or in their physical body, but those who live, and many, many do, in their awareness, in their intelligence, in their psychic extensions, their imaginations. Devotion then is this aspiration in an awareness being. It's a striving for, which may not be recognized as a longing for because of the nature of its disconnect from the heart and the body. But aspiration is also evidence that devotion is there. It's just the body isn't oriented to experiencing it or knowing it because it's habituated. And for an experiential being, devotion is the only thing that feeds them. Relations, emotions, feelings, sensations, that's what feeds an experiential being. But in awareness, it's the idea, it's the principles, it's the transcendences, it's the imaginations and the hopes and the futures that keep them going. But ultimately, grace purpose, grace source is from life, from the substance of life, of that tangible quality of spiritual energy when it's in matter. This is the Mahananda. So grace is the song, the scent of the Mahananda. She's here in everything living, even though those things don't know it. They're an expression of it. So it's a substantial quality that we find in nature that nourishes us in our nervous system, nourishes us in our cells, quiets our minds with its endless striving and worrying and anxieties, and allows us to recover our connection to all that, which at least for most people, nature is an access to. So when we speak of grace, we're speaking of something that's in fact already here. Our ability to perceive it, to experience it, to recognize it, is the only thing that actually separates us from grace, from the ocean of grace we swim in. So when we open to the universal, we open to a dimension of grace where it is, you could say, purposeful. It's not just the field, it's not just the ocean. There are beings and structures that if they can find an opening, will enter into and start working with the parts of your system that are most capable of receiving the grace. And the nature of the grace is sometimes, when you move into the universal, pretty fierce. It comes in and creates pain and suffering and trauma and dejection. So what looks like a curse is in fact evidence of the grace. And you'll know that because when it's finished at work, there's more space for grace. So the nature of it, it's a transformative, purposeful force, not just a passive thing we have to tap into. When we reach a certain stage of the spiritual path, the grace that's around us has activated the grace that's already within us. And the two strive to come together. So it is a divine romance. As a grace, it's a dance between the mother within us and the mother around us, and we've lost access, most of us, to that principle of Shakti and bliss and love within us. So it activates that quality in us. She calls us and we respond, and it's the same principle. It's the song. So grace is a mystery. Our moving into relationship of it isn't something you're going to be able to intellectualize it, because it won't follow even my languaging of how grace works. It will be its own unexpected thing to be discovered when the time is there. The issue is, are we there at that time? The point of grace is this quality of poise or being on the edge, attention to the possibility of grace is really the remembrance. That I'm living this life, I'm doing this work, I'm in the thing I don't think I want to do, that I'm in my repulsion, I'm in my reaction. If you just take a moment and say, okay, is this grace? Is grace here? You'll begin to open yourself up and in this way become the collaborator with grace finding an opening. Because often when we're in the midst of a sacrifice, an action that we're doing where there's no benefit or where there's something else we would rather do, grace is right there. What has a sacrifice is the grace within us that sacrifices and then makes sacred out of that sacrifice, the thing you sacrifice for. So if you sacrifice for your money or for your security or to be seen and recognized, then you're making sacred those things. You're making those things important. But if you sacrifice in the moment where there is nothing in it for you, that sacrifice is like a call to grace. I am here. I'm giving it all up. I'm willing to do what I need to do in this moment, that it may beseech you, that it may call you to come to me. All acts of sacrifice, where we truly do it not for our own benefit, become a means of making sacred our action. Even when we choose to attend to our breathing or join a group and we do Hung Sa or World Peace Awakening meditation, we're evoking our capacity to receive the grace. If we do it to get the grace, well, that could actually be an obstacle for the grace to come. So you have to do it as if there's nothing in it for you but the habit, but the discipline, but the practice. And when you actually have given up your agenda, your investment, that's when the grace can come. Selfless giving as a lived way of life is what the Gita points to very strongly in all the first chapters. Chapter 3, it reminds us that the whole universe is based on sacrifice. This whole creation is one thing sacrificing for something else. We live in the fruits of sacrifices of millions and millions of human beings over the ages to create the life of prosperity and the life of security that we have right now. So this recognition, this appreciation, how do you know its grace has come? Is because of this recognition and appreciation, because you will be in the thankfulness. You'll be in the glory. You'll be in the gratitude. I exist. I'm here. If not for the sacrifice of innumerable others, this would not have been possible. Grace comes, and then it's evidenced as gratitude. These three actually, sacrifice, grace, and gratitude. Faith, fourth factor, are all interrelated in the unfolding of that divine manifestation within us. The faith comes later. See, the gratitude and the grace and the sacrifice, they're the work. They're the evidence of the work. But the faith grows. And what is the faith? The faith is in the soul. In the very core organizing principle of your consciousness as an individual entity. It's the one that's here for a purpose, that keeps forgetting, can't access it, can't reach it. The soul is nurtured in a moment of grace, in a moment of gratitude, in the moment of sacrifice. Sacrifice is where we empower the sacredness of our own ability to sacrifice. We become a manifesting agency for the sacrifice of the Supreme for this existence, so that it may manifest an intent that was there prior to existence, to come into awareness, consciousness of itself, and it can only do that as us. This is our soul's mission. When we discover this within ourselves, then grace is within us. And not only that, we then become a channel for that grace. We become a reason to be sacrificed. We become the Lord of the sacrificing. We become the means by which people access that very same principle within themselves. So the mystery of grace is to recognize that as part, that is the evidence of the intent, the original intent of existence, the evolutionary purpose of existence. When we're in the field of grace, we're part of that evolutionary movement. automatically. But what allows us to do that is through our sacrifices, our willing to get off it, our willing to let go, our willing to make change, our willing to push through that which resists and opposes, is overridden by repulsion or preference or desire. To go beyond our fear, beyond our what ifs, beyond our trepidations, to be willing to go beyond ourselves. I'm sorry, it's the path. We have to live this. We have to make it integrated into our human life, not just our spiritual life. We have to discover how to bring it in and make it lived real for us. The mystery of grace. This is what I recognize at the moment of my awakening. Grace. The feeling was that I was found. That the universe found me. Oh my God, I just got hit by it. I had not been seeking. I did not feel I deserved this. There had not been any conscious effort to attain what came. It was grace. Even as I look back now, this may have had nothing to do with myself as an individual person. It may have been just an impersonal principle that randomly picked this one. I cannot claim it. I may have had nothing to do. It may have had nothing to do with this human life, or even some kind of credit due to past lifetimes. But I do recognize there was a grace that was with me in my life all along. A quality of sincere seeking, a knowing there was something more, an earnestness, a determination. There was a sense of purpose, that this was there when I was very young. Perhaps it was just necessary for this to happen to fulfill the purpose of the particular work I'm doing now. Or perhaps it was the fruit of lifetimes of favorable circumstances or positive karma earned through personal effort and the maturity of lives well lived. I do not know. The mystery doesn't work in cause and effect. Cause and effect is this dimension. It doesn't work in space and time. It works beyond space and time, and in space and time. Perhaps it's all these are factors. All I know is that there was a lottery to win. This was it. I don't know if my experience is repeatable. I don't know if I can take others to the same state. What I do know is that I can keep pointing to the reality of who you are in truth. Keep showing the path by which you can move in the direction based on your receptivity, based on your willingness. I cannot do any more. But then the grace, if I have any say, goes to you. It goes with my attention. When you receive my attention, you're receiving the grace. And the nature of that is it can throw you into repulsion. It can throw you into reaction. You know, the truth will make you free, but first it'll piss you off. The grace always introduces itself with the curse. Not always. Sometimes it brings in the grace and then the curse. Both are means by which we go beyond ourselves. Because we can't do what's needed for what hasn't yet come to us. We can't walk a path we have not yet traveled. All we have is the momentum of us living aligned with the possibility of grace. And then that pushes us through the curses and through the repulsions and through the reactions to receive it when the curse is first. A frank promise and reassurance. What I can share is what I know. There's a possibility that you will reach this state. There is a possibility that all of you here will reach this state. But it is a possibility. to make it an actuality, you are needed. Your effort, your willingness, your organization of your life on the base of truth and love, and the willingness to sacrifice and use sacrifice as the tool to move yourself alignment with that possibility. Yet be clear. You do not want to jump on this bandwagon before you're ready, because when it comes, it will be the end of your world as you've known it. Okay? So that's a disclaimer, you might say. But it's not. It's really a call to something more than you've known. Because I assure you, when your world ends will be the worst and the best moment of your life. Not only that, the responsibility that comes with this realization is something no self-respecting ego would want. The responsibility that comes to one who becomes aware that the grace is alive in them is not your own. It's the current of existence. It's the cry of the soul. It's the call of the pain of the world mother. It throws you into an arena of sacrificing that would never be available to you if you were just following your own individual human dharma, even your best dharma. So it's a call to something in us that's of a different order, a magnificence, an eloquence, a capacity that we couldn't find ourselves without that grace, without that recognition that you are the one that takes what's possible and brings it into existence, both within yourself and to whatever opportunities that arise in the context of that consciousness outside of yourself. The problem with the adolescent is that it wants to be an adult before it's ready. That's the problem. If it could be an adult right away, it would say, I don't want this, and go back to being a child. So the struggling in us that wants it our way, or wants it a certain way, is our immaturity. It's both rebellious and a demand. It has its own inner, that's called suffering, if you didn't know what suffering feels like, a divided quality within yourself. I want it and I don't want it. So the nature of immaturity is it thinks it wants something other than what it has, and it doesn't know that what it doesn't appreciate or recognize what it has. Because if it did, it wouldn't have the same difficulty. And you can't. Ignorance is ignorance. When you're in ignorance, all there is truth, the truth of ignorance. When there's something other than ignorance, something you haven't experienced yet or something you haven't known yet, you can't know that. So there is always a transitional point. It's inevitable there will be an adolescent phase. There's a childhood phase where we come out of the embrace of our mother, and then there's the developing child phase, and then there's the early adolescent phase where the biochemistry of the body changes, and then there's the later adolescent stage where we either rebel or we compromise and end up resentful and angry that we weren't able to live the way we want to live. But adulthood is something else. Adulthood is a recognition of your path. It's the unfolding of learning how to live aligned with that path, your dharma, what it is you were born for. In astrology, it's anywhere between the age of 24 to about 30, 31, where the Saturn return happens, where actually everything you were in past life comes to you this life. That's what astrology says. That you come to a place where, okay, I have something I want to do, something that was there, that was hidden from me, that I brought with me, that now I see a path forward with. That's early adulthood. The next stage, and that's human adulthood, but it's very relevant to spiritual childhood, spiritual adolescence, spiritual adulthood. And as we begin to live the path of our dharma, our spiritual adulthood, then sometime, 5-10 years later, we're in the midst of it. And this is the hard work. That's where we're in the mature middle adulthood phase. Now, for an architect, I remember what it was like. I was in, let's say, 2000. No, it was 1980s. So it had been 20 years, 15 or 20 years as an architect, or practicing as an architect. And it was late one night. I had 16 people working for me. I had 30 projects, 4 of which were going bad. I was spending the nights trying to figure out what needed to be done and do some of the drawings myself and fix this piece or that piece or leave notes on their desks. And in the middle of the night, I stopped and looked around and I said, I guess I'm an architect now. So it was something I aspired for, but when it came to me, it wasn't what I thought it was. Didn't have any inspiration left. It was just showing up. It was doing what was necessary and being the responsible one for that to happen. So maybe I'm still in middle adulthood, but it feels like I'm way past middle adulthood in terms of spiritual path because I'm now experiencing the consequences. Now I'm experiencing the paradigm that I had lived in is so much more expanded than the one I had lived in even a few years ago. So obviously, Dharma is a process of coming into relationship to what it means to be a mature human and spiritual being, not as an event, not as a goal, but as a process. What carries it in the current that takes us beyond that capacity we may have is grace. The sense of God, the sense of a purpose larger than ourselves, the willingness to sacrifice, but also the capacity to to experience the spaciousness, the eternal, unchanging reality that's there when we succeed in fulfilling the task that is before us, the completions. Once you become an adult, life is full of work and duties and responsibilities. The adolescent wants to become an adult but doesn't know what it means. It's the same thing on the spiritual path. It's better to be a child or a rebellious adolescent than to wake up to the reality that comes, for it requires more of you than you would otherwise want to give or let go of. To you, who would otherwise want to be an adult, is a whole different phase of human evolution. We go through all these stages every time we take a birth. These same stages occur on this path, on the spiritual path. That is not to say that you can't shift significantly from where you were to where you can be in this lifetime. The opportunity of each lifetime is to actualize this possibility as a lived reality for yourself, to do the best that you can. And that is enough. That's why it takes many lives. You can only do the best you can from the burden of ignorance and obscurity that you've inherited or brought with you. The best you can. The best you can means that whatever you do it for the highest good. Whatever you do, choose to be acting for the highest good. Not just for yourself, but for that principle, whatever the words higher good points to. Because the higher good is the Lord of sacrifice. The higher is you sacrifice for that quality, but is the source of grace itself. You will inevitably end up in the same place. Eventually, you will end up in that place where you will know that you are the cause, you are at responsibility, you're at the poise of holding all that is arising as a necessary sacrifice for an offering to a possibility that is yet not manifest. You're fooling yourself thinking you're just this one little person. Inevitably, you are going to return to the truth of what you are. Where you are now is a stage of the journey of consciousness. It's a passing phase. As you move from untruth to greater and greater truth, you will return to your original nature. It is inevitable. Those of you who are hearing this are already on this journey. It's already irrevocable. You can't lose the truth that has come to you. It will keep growing. It will be a challenging quality if you are living aligned with it, because it constantly asks more of you than what you've already given. I know how difficult this is. And I do know that the role I play is to support you in the process, to give you frank assessment of what is needed. It's up to you to decide to follow the guidance. But I will speak to the frank assessment, or I will give direction if you're still too caught up in your childhood or your adolescence to know that there is something more for you. I will give you a challenge. I will invite you to go beyond yourself. This is the nature of embodied guru. It intervenes. It sees a path forward that you can't see. It may not at all be what you would want from the point of the part that doesn't want to change, but it will certainly open up a door for grace to find its way into your system. I was reading the 12th chapter of Gita today. And in the 12th chapter, the 11th chapter. And in the 11th chapter, Arjuna is recognizing who Krishna is. He's not the guy he thought he was. And the nature of the unfolding of that for Arjuna was very near to a trauma. Terrifying, exciting beyond belief. Threw him into a quality of consciousness he couldn't tolerate, and eventually just asked Krishna to return to his original self. Each person who's come to this state is a doorway to the final outcome for those who come to them. It's a means, a path. Even in India, they say the guru is the path. And because if you can walk the path the guru has walked, if you can carry or be imbued with the energetic quality of the guru, then you will become that too. Now, it was not my ambition ever to be a guru. It was never in my plan, if there was a plan, around any of it. I was responding to the cry of the dejected soul, so it didn't even come clear to me until that day in 2007, Guru Purniyam Day in July, where I got it. I got that it all come, that it was all there, that all the manifestations were with me. There was nothing else, and that I was stupid not to see what that meant. I was still in my shroud of my devotion, of my habit of devotion as a shelter from the reality of what I had become. From then on, I was a Satguru. From that moment on, I knew I was responsible. I knew I was awake. I knew the obligation and the duty in that dimension of grace. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. Bringing that into this Western world, I had no idea. But I can't say that. I can say my human life told me something about the nature of the human ego in the West. I had one, right? I have one still. And we're crippled by our secular consciousness, by our skepticism and our doubt and our projections and our stories and our entitlements. We live for ourselves, but not our true self, our egos. And they're placated everywhere we turn, providing us endless enchantments for yet unexperienced variations. So difficult to know the grace in this field. You have to carve out your own territory to hold on to some sense of it. Build your own cabin in the woods or create a life that allows you to be sheltered from the storm of the atmosphere in this materialized part of the world. The more you develop on the spiritual path, the more open you become, the more likely you're going to take on the qualities of the people around you. The more likely you're going to be susceptible to suggestions that are in the atmosphere, in the news media, in the latest media's internet stream. They'll impact you because you're in a place that is not aligned with the truth, the unfolding of grace in you. So I can be this refuge, but you're the one who has to make it yours. To find a place where the grace is always with you, then no matter what the atmosphere is, it bows to you. Unlike many of you, when I would go home after my trip to India, every time I came back and I would visit my parents, instead of being a horrific event, they changed. They were different. They were a recognition of that something had happened that was extraordinary to me. My mother, my 2 brothers, 3 brothers, were all swept up in the current of what was becoming, because when the grace comes strongly, when the vessel is ready, it establishes itself wherever it is. It makes space for itself. It doesn't need the world to be a certain way. When I would travel, it's still the case. I'm always having to eat the energy of the atmosphere, of the place I'm staying at, the field of the energy around it. Some of it's enjoyable, some of it's awful. Usually my body goes through 3 days of varying degrees of misery as it makes space for itself. And then the grace gets established. Then I have a base. When I travel to new places, and each place is new, I remember one time I went to Europe, I think I had 5 different places I had to occur in. It just exhausted my system. I was sick for months afterwards. So you need to be careful of your atmosphere until you're strong enough. And even then, the way I've grown stronger is by doing it, but my body is the limit setter. It can only do so much. Now I have a place. This place is allowing for the grace to grow. The more I have this place, the more I can stay in this body, the more I can do this work. This is just a practicality. India is wonderful. It's a field of grace, but I do it for you. I don't do it for me. I do it so you can have the opportunity of living in an atmosphere that's saturated in this grace. To use these times as your period of recovery and strengthening of the grace within you. Grace is everything. Grace is the most important thing. Live for the grace. Breathe the grace. Know that it is with you already. You don't have to call it God or Supreme Being. Let it just be this grace. Divine Mother. These are just labels. Grace, when it comes, is evidence that the song of the Supreme that's calling us all has brought us to it. And all there is gratitude. All of this is awe. It must be my Western ego that just wishes it could do more, but this is enough. So let's just take the next period of time and let's just sit in the field of grace and let it come in. Let it saturate every cell of our body. Let it enter into our hearts and our minds and our bodies. Let it take over the territory. Let it be yours. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shree. All glory to Supreme. May truth, love, and grace flow in and through all of you. Namaste.